Ready. Play.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I forgot to take away the overlay, but that is one of the smallest mistakes I've made in talking tennis history. So that gives you some indication of some of the other errors that I've committed over the last, 8-9 months. And I'm really pleased to be joined by Will Buchek from the Tennis Tribe once again, with sort of a frequent thing that we do post Grand Slam, or if doubles are in the headlines at any other moment, as well as they occasionally are. I remember Riley Opelka certainly brought us together, Will, for a show at one point. But Riley Opelka aside, we are here to talk about some of the winners and some of the not winners, if you like, at the French Open. Give us a broad view on the doubles tournaments as a whole.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Roland Garros, I feel like usually creates. I don't know if they say this about singles as well, but I feel like it's definitely a little bit of an equalizer. I know a lot of people say that it's their favorite of the four majors because the points seem to be longer. That also seems to be true on the double side. There's a lot fewer, especially on the men's side, fewer points where it's serve and then a first volley, and that's the end of the point, right? That you have some more exciting points. And because of that, I think this is the third or fourth year in a row on the men's side where there's been
some doubles action in the background there, Will.
Yeah. Where there's been an unseeded team in the final.
Okay.
So I feel like that can happen more. And one thing I did notice, I was looking through the draws again earlier, is this year was a little different because there was a lot of straight set victories on both sides. So in 2022, from the quarterfinal on, 6 of the 7 matches were 3 setters, whereas this year only 1 out of 7 were 3 setters on the men's side. The women's side also had a lot of straight set matches. So I felt like there was a little less drama in terms of the tennis matches this year, but there was some kind of in between points off the court drama that we'll get into, I'm sure.
We will. I'll tell you what, let's start with that, actually. Let's talk about that drama that you're referring to, which, of course, is the disqualification through, I don't know, Will, what would you call it? It could be described as being careless. It could be described, I know, by some as, against the rules. What happened? I'll tell you what happened, actually. I'll tell our audience what happened. We had this match between Sutjiadi and Kato on one side of the net, and Bouzkova and Sorribes Tormo on the other. In a way, Bouzkova and Sorribes Tormo became the story even more than the pairing that got disqualified. I'm going to see if I can just share a couple of images at least on the screen as I talk us through this. And as we can see from the circle here, what occurred was, I think it was Kato, right? The Japanese player who just sort of, the end of the point. Well, I mean, but I'm telling you, the end of the point, you kind of go, okay, here you go. Here's the ball, going to knock it back to the side of the net. And unfortunately, this stray ball ended up hitting the ball girl. Now, okay, it was accidental, right? I'm not saying we'll get to whether it should have been a disqualification right now, but it was accidental, right? There was no intent. Am I right on that?
Yeah, I don't think anybody who's watched the video has said she did that on purpose.
Right.
It was and people who know her, she doesn't do things like that. So definitely accidental.
Who had won the previous point or game, I should say? There was obviously a moment. Had they just won the previous game, or I'm making the case here just because I know when Djokovic, when that happened with him, very similar incident. If people, I'm sure, remember that one, he had just been broken serve and he was frustrated. So go on.
I think they had just lost the previous point, I believe, if I remember that correctly. But yeah, this It's similar in that she hit someone at the back, above kind of the shoulder area. But if you watch it, it was not. She did not hit this ball out of frustration like Djokovic
Right.
did in the U.S.
Yeah.
Open. He definitely was turning, was not looking, and was hitting it. He didn't smack it against the fence super hard, but he was hitting it against the back wall out of frustration, and this was not that.
Do the rules, what do the rules suggest on this? And of course, this is across tennis, not just doubles. What do the rules suggest? Do they take into account intent, or what's the score on that front?
No, I mean, I read one article about it that kind of pulled the rule from the rule book, and there's not a rule on it as far as Roland Garros goes, and it looked like from what I remember, they don't address this directly, and this is an area that I think tennis as a whole, maybe there's so many different organizations, so it's hard to know who would be responsible for this, whether it's the ATP, WTA, French Federation, and then each Grand Slam does it their own way. I don't know, but they do need to revisit this because if you look at other sports, like basketball is the example I was going to bring up, like in the US and the NBA, there's different levels of flagrant fouls, is what they call them. So there can be forcible contact to the head or neck area, is a term that I think they use in American football as well. The words like intentional, words like egregious are in a lot of those rules, and tennis just doesn't have something like that. And I think some kind of escalated rule would help a lot, to where it's like if there is intent, and then first of all, to get to all this, they need to be able to review it right with video. But if there is intent, like in the case of Djokovic 2021 US Open, then it needs to be a more severe penalty versus in this scenario, you watch that, it's clearly not intentional. It's clearly not out of frustration. So the rules are very gray, to answer your question. They're really aren't very distinct rules that are to be followed here.
Sadly, their final appeal, if you like, is of course the decision to disqualify them was pretty swift. Well, I mean, there was actually initially, there was no major issue, right? And it was the objections of their opponents, Bouzkova and Sorribes Tormo. It was their objections that then brought which is probably the biggest debate, at least as far as Twitter sphere is concerned. What did you think about their conduct? Because it was their conduct that basically got their opponents disqualified. Otherwise, they would have probably continued the match. In fact, I'm sure they would have done.
Yeah.
The umpire was okay. The umpire wasn't.
Right.
You know.
The umpire, it seemed like the umpire was not going to disqualify her. And then somebody else stepped out onto the court. I guess it was the head referee, maybe.
Yeah.
And then that she was disqualified. I think for Bouzkova and her partner, I think it's a little bit kind of low class to me. Like,
Yeah.
you don't want to win a match like that, right? Like, I don't know. Like, if it were something where she had done it intentionally or out of frustration, then maybe I would get it a little more. But like, they have played against each other before, I'm sure, and like they know that she wouldn't do something like that. So I don't know. I wouldn't want to win a match like that. I feel like you kind of let that slide and you keep playing the match. So I don't know. That's my thoughts on it, but I know there's money on the line. So yeah, I guess you try to win any way you can in certain cases.
It's a pretty broad thought, though. I think most people feel the same. I don't know if there was one of the two, Bouzkova or Sorribes Tormo, that was slightly more vociferous than the other. And humans being humans, we can sort of get carried away, and there can be a leader in any group, and then we end up following that. And I don't know. I'd have to, I'd have to know the two, the two players a lot better, really.
Right.
That's for sure. But it's a pity because I think both of those players are fairly popular, at least on the singles tour. Sorribes Tormo, of course, had an epic match, I think a day or two later with Hadaj Maya, and is a pretty popular figure on the tour, Sorribes Tormo. So, yeah, but the reason I mentioned there was a final defeat, if you like, for Kato today. And there's a happy ending to this story, and we'll get to it in a second. But Kato took to Twitter again just today to say that I think it was her first match on grass hadn't gone quite to plan. And not only that, she had kind of a couple of defeats because the French Open still did not reverse the decision to fine her and her partner, I guess, as well. I think they were both fined, am I right? Or at least they didn't get their prize money. So basically, the final sort of kick in the teeth occurred in the last sort of few hours, as it turned out, and it's been an ongoing story. But good news, Will. What happened in the mixed doubles?
So she went on to win the mixed doubles title. I guess it was around a week or so later. So that was, I don't know, I guess a silver lining kind of. I guess the two aren't particularly related, but maybe it kind of motivated her to and her partner to kind of push for the mixed doubles title, which they won. And back to the incident, I think the takeaway from something like this is, like, is there controversy around it? And really there wasn't. Like, every single person on Twitter, all of the articles, everyone was on her side. Like, no one thought she should have been disqualified. No one thought she should have been fined, taken her prize money, taken her points away. So, like, that's when you know, okay, they need to fix this problem. Like, there's something wrong here. In a lot of cases, like Djokovic 2021, like, there was controversy. There was arguments on both sides. He should be disqualified. He should not be disqualified. And I saw both arguments in that case. But in this one, it was just so unintentional. And you see just as often, or way more often, you'll see the player do the exact same thing she did, and the ball person's looking and they catch it. It happened to be the case that the ball person was not looking, and then she saw it at the last minute, and then it hit her in the face. So that's not on Kato. It's not on the ball person either. Like, the ball person can't always see the ball that's coming to them. It's just an unlucky incident. So, you know, maybe a point penalty or something, but nobody thought she should have been disqualified. But anyways, they did go on to win the mixed doubles title, which was I was happy to see. I think a lot of people were rooting for her.
Yeah, but I think there's a little bit of a funny tale regarding the final itself on the mixed doubles, because we also had on the other side of the net Michael Venus, but alongside Michael Venus was Bianca Andreescu. Does she have any doubles pedigree?
Not a lot. Let me look up her doubles history at Grand Slams.
Let me just read out the sort of what happened in the final. So Kato and I think it's German guy Tim Puetz, they were on the successful team, defeating Andreescu and Venus 4-6, 6-4, and then 10-6 in the tiebreak to win the mixed doubles title. But Andreescu was a name I probably didn't expect to see in a doubles final. But you know, maybe there's something there.
So Grand Slam doubles results. This is actually worse than I expected. She made the first round of the U.S. Open in 2019, and that is it. She has not played women's doubles in another Grand Slam, and it looks like it was her first Grand Slam to ever play mixed doubles.
Well, maybe there's something there then. There's a pedigree being built, perhaps.
There should be. That's impressive. And Michael Venus does have a history of playing.
Okay.
I think he won the men's title at the French Open 2018 with Ryan Harrison, or 2017 maybe. So he's been good on clay in the past. So it was not super surprising to see him there. But yes, Andreescu was a bit of a shocker to see in the final there.
Any other big storylines, would you say, from the mixed doubles tournament?
Not a lot. To be honest with you, I didn't get a chance to watch a lot of it because they seem to schedule the mix so early. So for me, a lot of those matches were at 4 a.m. my time. So I just did not get up for those. Not a whole lot else on the mixed side. I think Another women's story that I know we wanted to talk about was the Czechs.
Yeah. Well, so the winners are, well, actually, no, let's start with the Czechs, because how shocking was that on a sort of, seismic level, if you like, the departure of them in the first round, I think it was, or was it the second?
First round.
First round. So,
Yeah.
when was the last time they'd even lost a Grand Slam match?
So they lost a Grand Slam in 2021 at the US Open. So it's been about a year and a half.
Getting on for getting on for sort of closer
Almost
to
2
2 years.
years,
Yeah,
really.
right.
Yeah,
Now
yeah.
they had missed 1 or 2 tournaments in that period, right?
So they missed Roland Garros last year because I think Krejcikova was
COVID.
injured.
She had
Yeah,
she
had COVID.
lost her
That's
first round
right.
match. I think she got COVID. Her first round singles
Okay,
match.
that's right. So they won the other 3 that they entered last year. Aussie, Wimbledon, US, and then came back and won Aussie this year. So it was becoming, and Hanlon and I have both written about it and we talked to them at the WTA finals last year, and it was kind of becoming the most difficult thing to do at a Grand Slam, is beat the Czechs in a full, with 2 out of 3 set match. They had won 4 in a row, and a few teams had taken them to 3 sets, but I think in those 4 Grand Slams, they had only gone to 3 sets 6 times, and 3 of the 4, they only lost 1 set the entire tournament. So yeah, to lose first round was shocking. Now, Siniakova was coming off of an injury, so
Okay.
there is that to consider, but that's happened over the last couple of years. I mean, they've come off injuries and come back and won their first tournament back. So it was still, really surprising. The other thing I will say is at the Australian Open this year, they won the tournament. They lost 1 set. It was in the first round, and it was against Ulrikke Eikeri. I think I'm pronouncing that right. So she was playing with Catherine Harrison at the time, and that was their only set lost at the Australian Open. So
That was the tiny clue. That was a tiny clue, at least.
Yes. So Eikeri seems to maybe have some kind of tell on them or strategic advantage or something about their game that matches up well. But I was still, definitely blown away by that result.
Okay, so let's progress through the women's doubles tournament, and let's get to the final. What did you make of the women's doubles final?
So, Hsieh, it's unbelievable what she did in only her, I don't know, 3rd tournament back, something like that. I know she came back for Madrid, and played maybe 1 or 2 since then. After taking off almost 2 years, really. So she goes on to win the title with Xinyu Wang. And really, this was kind of a missed opportunity, I thought, for Coco and Jessica. They made the final. They made the final last year and lost, and have been kind of one of the more consistent teams in majors the last couple of years. I mean, they've really probably been the second best women's doubles team next to the Czechs the last couple of years. So when the Czechs went out early, it seemed like the draw was kind of in their favor to move forward. But Leylah, Fernandez, and Taylor Townsend played a great match against them. And they're no easy team to beat anyways in the semifinals. But yeah, I mean, the story of the tournament's definitely Hsieh's comeback. She, like I said, had just come back during Madrid, and let me pull up the teams she beat.
I'd also like to know about Leylah Fernandez and her sort of capabilities, do you think, long-term as a doubles player?
Yeah, so Hanlon actually just wrote an article on them that we published earlier this week.
I'll have a look for that, yeah.
But so Hsieh and Wang beat an unseeded team in the first round, so Puetz and her partner, and then from there they beat the 9 seed, the 5 seed, the 15 seed, which was Kudermetova and Samsonova, who are probably not a 15 seed. They're probably more like a top 5 seed. Melikar, Martinez, and Perez is 6 seed. Fernandez and Townsend, the 10 seed. So those are all potentially like Grand Slam final matches. Really, like you wouldn't be shocked at all to see any of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams in a Grand Slam final, because Mladenovic won the French Open last year. Zheng Shui is a very good doubles player. Krejcikova and Scherz have been one of the best teams throughout the clay season. Kudermetova and Samsonova already have a Masters 1000 title this year. I think they made the finals of another one. Melikar, Martinez, and Perez have been one of the best teams, certainly last fall. They were, and then around this time last year, they started to pick it up. And then Fernandez and Townsend have had, I think they're in the top 8 in the race as well. So just a really, really good draw and really good tournament from Hsieh and Wang.
And I have just found the article you were referring to from Hanlon here regarding Fernandez and Townsend. Of course, they are at opposite ends of their career. Is that a common tactic in doubles? Is it a good tactic to sort of have maybe someone with a bit more legs and someone with a bit more experience, and then that recipe sort of breeds success?
Yes. So I actually spoke with them in Charleston, and it was their 3rd tournament together. So they played the Sunshine Double, made the finals in Miami, I believe. Or no, they won Miami. Or made the finals. I'm not sure. But regardless, they made a run in Miami. And Taylor said they had almost never spoken to each other before they teamed up. And I asked Leylah about that. What's it like playing with Taylor, who's got so much experience? She's been a good doubles player for a long time. And I think it does help. Leylah said she's able to just kind of listen to Taylor. Taylor calls the shots, and then Leylah just goes out and executes and doesn't really have to think as much about what to do. She just executes the kind of game plan. So I do think it does help. They also said that they had a goal to make the year-end finals this year, which was really encouraging, because it's great for doubles when a team like this, especially someone with as much singles popularity as Leylah Fernandez has, plays doubles. Yeah, they're a really good team. They're fun to watch. And one of the things that makes them so difficult is they're both left-handed. So you almost never play a team where both players are left-handed. So it kind of makes everything a little more awkward for their opponents.
But generally, again, if off the top of my head, and someone who has a lot less knowledge, especially tactically, about doubles than you would have, Will. But to me, it would make sense to have 2 people at opposite ends of the career, if you like. I think in tennis, singles, you probably just want the peak would be sort of 29, 30 years old or whatever. But actually in doubles, I think it could work quite well to have that. On top of that, I would have thought, a left-hander and a right-hander would probably be a good combination, unless of course you're both weak on the backhand side and then balls down the middle, or what are your thoughts? I mean, right now it's maybe you're right because they're both left-handers and it's a bit fresh, but maybe they could get figured out. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. I think you do see a lot of lefty-righty combos, and typically they're going to play with forehands in the middle, so the lefty will return from the deuce court.
Got it.
And that is what I usually recommend, all else equal. But
Will, sorry, I want to stop you here because I've got a personal question about doubles tennis. If you are stronger on the forehand, okay, so take myself, I've got a better forehand than my backhand. My backhand's getting better, but it still needs huge amounts of improvements. The general consensus is that you should be in the deuce court to receive. If there was somebody who, let's say we're both right-handers, and my partner and I, he's got a really good, backhand. I've got a really good forehand. That would make sense for me to be on the right-hand side, and that's the deuce court, I believe, to receive, and he would take the ad court to receive. Is that the general sort of thing? So therefore, I'm anticipating a serve going out wide to my forehand.
Yeah, it kind of depends. So in general, yes, but there's a lot of caveats where that's not true. A lot of situations
Okay.
where that's not true. So like I, for example, prefer my forehand to my backhand ground stroke, but I can hit a good backhand return. So I'll
Yeah,
still because the return and the ground stroke are not the same thing. So
completely agree. Completely
so
agree.
I will play the ad court a lot, and I'll hit the backhand return well. And then if the
Hmm.
ball comes back to me, I'll just run around my backhand because I'm only
Yeah,
having to cover half the court. So
yeah.
I'll still play the ad court, and I'll go an entire match without hitting a backhand ground stroke. I'll hit plenty of backhand returns,
Yeah.
but I'm able to run around my backhand ground stroke. So I think in a lot of cases that makes more sense. But
In doubles, it's a bit easier to run around. That's how it
yeah,
feels to me. You get more, maybe because of the size of the court and the dynamics of the points. For whatever
hmm
reason, it does tend to be because I'm running around a lot,
yeah.
and in singles I can't run around as often as I can in doubles.
Yeah. I mean, you're not covering as much court. And then also,
Exactly.
most of the rallies are going to be cross court.
Yeah.
So, um, because the ball's traveling a longer path cross
Yeah.
court, you've got more time to run around. So, a lot of that's going to depend on your return preferences, your agility and ability to run around. If you're um, a lot of club level players who may be in their 60s and have a knee replacement or something may not be able to run around their backhand as easily as I can. So it just depends. But in general, I would say you're right. The forehand will typically play the deuce court.
Okay, over to the men's side of the doubles, men's that is.
hmm
Ivan Dodig and Austin Krejcik defeated Xander Schil and Joran Fliegen. I hope I'm not butchering all these names. It was a comfortable win. You did touch upon it at the beginning of this show that there were quite a few comfortable victories, if you like, a lot of straight sets wins. This one happened to be 6-3, 6-1. It was Dodig's third major men's title, and it was the first for Krejcik. And just before we
hmm
went live, I mentioned Austin Krejcik, one of the doubles pairings that won it, of course, or one of the two players that did win the title. And I asked you, is he a relation of Richard Krejcik? And by the wonders of the internet, Will, you found out the answer to that. So, drum roll. Is he related to Richard Krejcik?
It says he is a distant cousin. So somehow, some way, he is related.
In Ireland,
Uh,
by the way, Will, you just have to have a Guinness with somebody, and then you're suddenly a distant cousin of theirs. So I don't know whether
okay.
that's the same in the Netherlands or the US, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't speak to that. But yeah, Austin, he lives actually near me in the Dallas area, and
Okay.
played college tennis at Texas A&M. And
So
he
we've got a
and
guy called Austin living in Texas.
that's right. So he and Dodig made the final last year, and I remember watching that match against Arevalo and Roger, and I believe they had one or two, maybe more set point or match points in the second set. They had won the first set. They ended up losing 6-3 in the third,
Okay.
but they were the better team for the majority of that match. So it was, um, kind of good to see them come back and win it this year because they were so close last
Mm.
year, especially for Austin, who doesn't have a major before this year. Um, and yeah, I mean, they were the better team. Obviously winning 6-3, 6-1 in that final. It was a very straightforward final for them. I know they've worked with Phil Farmer for a long time, who used to work with the Bryan brothers, and he clearly had a really good game plan for them. And yeah, it was a straightforward victory.
Will, any other double stories from the French Open that you'd like to bring to our attention?
So after the match, Dodig, not a lot of people saw this. Hanlon actually had to tell me because um, I had to leave after the first set, I believe, because I was out of town. So they started showing the men's doubles on NBC here in the States, and then they flipped it over to Peacock, and you had to stream it.
Oh,
And so nobody was watching it at that point except probably Hanlon and a few others. And they showed uh, the post match interviews, and Dodig went last. And at the very end of his interview, he called out the tournament because apparently he had been taking a taxi to the tournament every day. They didn't have transportation for him. And he's won Roland Garros before. It was his third major. So he essentially just said, and his English isn't perfect, so I didn't get all of it, but he was essentially, it sounded like he was saying, you have to do better. Like, this is ridiculous. I'm a major champion and you can't even provide transportation for me to play in the tournament. So I found that, I don't know, a bit of drama kind of interesting, and, good for him for calling him out, because that is insane that he should be taking a cab to the tournament.
Well, it's not French Open related, but of course we have had different complaints about respect, shall we say, regarding what happened in Madrid a few weeks ago when we had the women's doubles final, which was Azarenka and someone. You're going to have to tell me who Azarenka's partner was.
Haddad Maia. Yeah.
Haddad Maia. Okay, right. Azarenka, Haddad Maia. Well, that's a great combination, by the way, in terms of abilities, at least. Up against Pegula and Goff. So they, to those that aren't aware, there was no after-match speeches from either players, and it was sort of seemed like a pretty rushed affair as well. There are sort of three topics, and the third one is the one I'd like to get your thoughts on, Will, because I think it may well be relevant and hasn't really been spoken about. The other two topics are, I do think there's a discord between players and the media, and I think that both tours are responsible for this. I've been in the environment where I've tried to speak to players, and I sometimes wonder if the messages are being passed on, let's say. I think there's a bit of a fear factor that is created by the two factors here, players and organizations. I've been in newsrooms as well where that factor is involved. I've also been waiting in a newsroom for a potential press conference that never came. The next day, I'm told that the player didn't want to do it. I don't necessarily believe the authorities that they ever asked said player, if I'm honest. But anyway, I just don't know. But there's a discord. So that's the first thing. And I do think it's relevant to that lack of speeches as well. I think that maybe they just thought that because there's no relationship going on between the three factors here, maybe they just didn't ask the players, whereas the players, of course, would like to give some sort of speech afterwards. The second element, of course, is the significant possibility, possibly more in Madrid, given the nature of the tournament and certain other things, that there is a sort of, oh, it's just the women, so boom. And I think that's been spoken about a lot, and I'm probably not in a position to expand further. And that's been spoken about in depth and intelligently by people that are far closer to that matter than I am. The third element, and perhaps is one that we've neglected, Will, is the fact that it was a doubles final as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting.
It was on a Sunday afternoon just before Alcaraz was playing against Struff in the singles final. So I think,
Right. Yeah, so this is something we've talked about on this show before, and that is, it seems like the US respects doubles slightly more than a lot of the European tournaments. And I've talked to multiple players on both tours who have told me they feel like, they don't know for sure, but they feel like the attendance is a little better in the US for their doubles matches. So
were you at Indian Wells this year?
Yeah. The attendance was incredible. Every single doubles match was kind of one in, one out. Like, you couldn't find a seat. So yeah. And then there was this tweet by Ben Rothenberg. I saw the day after the doubles, men's doubles final. Krejcikova just hit number one in the world in doubles. He's the 20th US doubles player to reach number one in the world, and the next closest country has 4. So that success in the US in terms of doubles hasn't been even close to matched by any other country as well. So maybe all of this kind of feeds into each other. But yeah, that I remember seeing the tweets and Instagram posts and stuff by Azarenka, as well as I think Coco or Jessica, or maybe both, shared some feelings about it. And they weren't allowed to speak after their match, which is very, very unusual.
Yeah. There's a fourth possibility as well, and I think all are distinct anyway. And I just think that it's also perhaps an organizational thing. I mean, there were other issues during that tournament. I was there pretty much from day 1 to day 14. I had a great time because I think Madrid is a great city, and there's so many things there, by the way. They're actually pretty well organized, but there's lots of other things that are fairly chaotic, as they are at all tournaments, by the way. I've not found one tournament that's necessarily any better. Sometimes the organization is really good, but that means they're not flexible, if you like. And you get organizations, and then you get strictness, and everything has to be run, and that's fine. But then people get thrown out of crowds because they're not wearing the right T-shirt or whatever. So there are pros and cons, in my opinion, to every tournament. But one of the things I felt through across the 3 tournaments that I covered quite closely on the Iberian Peninsula between the beginning of April and beginning of May was this discord. And I don't think that it can be ignored regarding the doubles players either, because I'm telling you now, I would have loved there to have been a press conference with both the winners and losers. I would have loved to have had a one-on-one. I was putting my hat in rings left, right, and center. I was going more in and out of rings than a magician. So I was really keen to talk to players. And I even said before the women's doubles final, I said, will there be a press conference afterwards? And I got a flat out no, as I'd got off often before with other requests. Now, I'm small. I know I'm a small YouTube channel, but the desire is there. There are people that are putting blocks in the way. Now, I don't think the players are innocent either, Will. And I'll give you an example of that. We don't speak to them when they lose. Rarely.
Yeah.
I know the majors they're made to, but at the aside from the major tournaments, the other tournaments, and even when they win, there's a sort of, if you fancy talking to the media, and I think there's a communication issue here as well, because I get it. I probably wouldn't fancy it, but if somebody sort of tapped me on the head and said, by the way, without this sport will die. The sport will or will recede, and we, whether it be you with your podcast and your website and all the other things that you do, certainly for doubles in particular, I know I'm a very tiny thing in the whole thing, but all of this, these are little drops, if you like, that make up and
they
give
matter.
the exposure that the players need so that they can have phenomenal, prize money. And I'm more than happy for that. But I just think that somebody needs to do something, and the fear factor needs to go somehow, and also the understanding that. And I do think it contributes to the lack of the speeches that we had on the court afterwards as well.
So did you have a media pass in Madrid?
Yeah, I had a media pass for Estoril, Barcelona, which was both ATP, and then Madrid, of course, which is both.
So the tournaments here, I typically will put in like requests before the match, right? Is that
That's
how
right.
it worked there?
That's exactly how it works.
So you put in a request for the winner of the doubles final, and they just took no.
I put in a request before the final started to say if I could speak to, but I just first of all said press conference, because I thought they're not going to give me a one-on-one with the winners of the doubles.
For doubles they will.
Well, Madrid, trust me, that isn't.
Oh, Madrid maybe won't, but
I said, because I said, can I speak? And they said, well, no, of course, fine. I said press conference then, with the not happening. Okay, fine. That was the last I heard of it. But to be honest with you, that was the attitude I got for about, and I would say across let me tell you this as well, on the singles side, at least anyway, I asked for one-on-one interviews from the minute I arrived in Estoril to the day I left in Madrid, which was probably across about a month. That probably included, and a lot of the times that was 5 or 6 a day, because I think I could do 3 on the women's side and 3 on the men's in Madrid at least, and at the other tournaments, obviously entirely member. But I don't know, let's say 100 requests. And I think about 96 just got ignored for came to fruition, and that's great. And they're all up on YouTube, and our audience has been out there. And by the way, I get really positive feedback. I love this opportunity to get a bit closer to the players. Now it was just 4 or 5 interviews, admittedly, but there are others out there, because I might have some of my viewers going, "Oh, but we saw you talk to Dominic Thiem, blah blah blah," and that's true. That was in the mix zone. That's a bit different to the the one-on-ones that I had with Laura Sigmund, for example, who, by the way, told me in Madrid that she's really trying to focus on the doubles this year a bit more. And I think she pulled out the singles, I think partly because of that at the French Open, albeit that she didn't have a great deal of success in the doubles either. But that's one thing. And I don't always think the messages were being passed on. Maybe 96 out of 100 just said no. But there's, by the way, one player I spoke to in defeat. So this is across all of those tournaments, all of those matches, including the requests. And by the way, I'd put a request in. You could also tick a box saying if they win or whether they win or lose. I would just say whether they win or lose. I can handle that scenario. There was one player that I remember coming to talk to us in a mixed zone after defeat, and that was Dominic Thiem. In Estoril, and that was one little memory for me as well. But anyway, Will, if you want to react to anything that I've said, I know we're coming towards the end of our time now, so
no, I mean, I think you're right, like from the bigger picture. Whether it's you with your YouTube channel or us trying to help make doubles more popular, even the smallest blogs, if you're going to give out these media credentials, which you should, because these people are trying to grow the sport. These interviews are kind of needed to get exposure to the players. And if they're not happening, especially if the requests are being ignored, which I haven't had that experience here, like the tournaments I've been to, there's 2, maybe 3 individuals. I'm not going to say them by name, but who I've worked with at whether it's Charleston or Canada or the WTA finals last year. And they've all been great. I mean, they've all been, I'll put in 4 or 5 requests at the beginning of the day, and they might come back to me and say, "Hey, Jessica Pegula is going to be a tough one because she just got in town last night and has practice today. But we'll be able to get you these 2." It's like I at least get a response, even if it's a no, rather than just no response at all.
Listen, I think the WTA has loads of issues as well, but actually I will say that I tended to get more success on that side than on the men's side. As I think I requested, like I say, probably across the 3 tournaments, I don't know, somewhere between 50 and 100 times. And by the way, on the media day, for example, I just said, I'll just take. Now, I'm small. I get that. I get it that, Davidovich Fokina maybe wants to speak to, Marca, a Spanish newspaper or whatever, or ex-player. And by the way, I don't mind. I was over the moon to get Laura Sigmund. I was just delighted. I also got Ostapenko, by the way, and I got Pavlyuchenkova as well. These are sort of the 4 or 5 one-on-ones that I got. That's 3 of them, for example. But I was finding with the ATP is really probably what I'm thinking of throughout the 3 tournaments. I was sending the email in every day, and I actually did follow up a couple of times saying, "Did you get the email?" "Yeah, and we'll let you know if any of these 3 players on your list." And I wasn't going for, Djokovic and Nadal weren't at either tournament. I was rarely asking for Alcaraz because I knew I'd get him in another scenario anyway. And to be honest with you, the list of interviews that he had was different. So, I was, aiming low, if you like, in terms of the rankings. But listen, Will, maybe it's a different scenario in North America, and I would love to be in New York, but that is dependent on my press pass application. And I'm aware of Talking Tennis's standing. We're getting. Well, I'm off to Berlin next week for a WTA tournament there, which is great. Cool. 500. I'm super happy with this. I've got Jamie and Nick are off to a WTA 250 in Nottingham as well next week, and this is great for the channel. I'm awesome. Yeah, I've seen a name from somebody in the live chat, and I'll address that some other time. But there's an interesting point there. But Yeah, and but by the way, what people are doing who are working for the ATP and WTA in terms of their media outlet, that's kind of okay, but it's not journalism. It's like watching Manchester United television or Chelsea television or
Sure.
I'm guessing US football has their own media. You're not going to get a critical view, if you like, of or even get difficult questions posed at press conferences when the Chicago Bears, whoever their website manager is asking the coach. I don't think they're going to ask them a tricky question. Anyway, listen, Will, just any final thoughts on doubles right now?
No, this kind of got me thinking, and maybe we do this, have this conversation another time. But I think a lot of the issues that we talk about when I do come on are related to like all the disparate, like, separate organizations that tennis is kind of working within. Nobody's kind of in sync. And
No.
it's been interesting to follow the golf news recently with Liv kind of merging with the PGA all of a sudden. And I don't know. I'm curious where tennis is in like 10 or 20 years. Like I've had some conversations recently with people about why Liv wasn't going to work out from the start, because they were just going right for the top golf league in the world rather than kind of building it from the ground up. And I wonder if UTR in 10 or 20 years is going to be running more high level professional tournaments. Again, this is probably a conversation for another time, but they seem to be doing a lot of things right. They started with juniors, then they moved up to college. Now they're running small level pro events, and they're doing a great job from what I can tell. And like, maybe it's that type of organization that needs to end up kind of running professional tennis globally. I don't know.
There's we're both on a time schedule because I've got it going too, but there is a lack of, I think, awareness. I spoke to somebody last week who's doing a bit of research regarding fandom, actually, but actually we went off in all sorts of directions, and actually the media and the role that we play in that, and the tournaments as well play, and also getting the product out to the people. Because actually one of the points, what the last things was I was asked was just about, with these 4 players leaving tennis, Serena and then the big 3, and we've lost arguably 3 of the 4, stellar giants of the tournament. I mean, a tour. I know Rafa's potentially going to have another year, but you know what I mean. So we've just got Djokovic left. How much of an effect that would have? And I actually gave a lot of people are pretty optimistic, saying, yeah, tennis has been fine. We've lost Becker and all the rest of it in the past, and Ed Berg and Navratilova and so on and so forth. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. I don't think we ever lost 4 players like this all at the same time. We've also never lost these people in the age that we're living in. It's a social media age, and it's a very different age right now. We've never, so I still think tennis will be okay, but I think it does need to pay attention. And I think the Netflix thing, I don't know. I think you were more enthusiastic about that series than I was. But I think tennis needs to take care. And I think Wimbledon, for example, charging journalists £100 each for a desk. Come on.
Yeah.
I don't think
do they need that?
Let me tell you this. Wimbledon will not go under, and tennis won't fold as a sport and won't be a success because it lost $5,000 or $10,000 because they didn't charge journalists for a desk. It will go under if you don't get the exposure that it deserves, because journalists are going, you know what, we're not going to pay that 100. That's silly. I mean, Madrid, by the way, 38. I'll put this in dollars for everyone. $50 for a lunch for the media. Now, I'm paying for that because it's my organization, so I just went somewhere else. Fine. Other organizations where the journalists are getting paid, by the way, and they don't have to pay that $50, that's also fine. I get that. But when they go back to London, or when they go back to Barcelona or Lisbon or even New York, wherever they're coming from, and they say, by the way, here's my hotel bill and here's the food bill, by the way, and they go, what? It's €1,000 to feed you over 2 weeks? We're not sending you there next year.
Yeah.
And they're cutting off their nose to spite their face.
Yeah. It's just
anyway,
they have their priorities a little bit wrong.
Short term. Anyway, sorry, Will, for sort of going off on that direction.
All good.
I'd love to have you on again as well, along with Hanlon, and we'll do some double stuff, perhaps sometime after Wimbledon.
Yeah, absolutely. I will
unless
be
something
around.
major happens in between, and I'll be on that phone trying to get hold of you. And
Yeah.
we may cross paths in New York as well. I'll let you know about that too.
Cool. Sounds good. Thanks for having
Thanks
me on.
so much, Will, for coming on. And to the rest of you, yeah, thanks for stopping by. And I'll get this video ready. You know the drill, and we'll speak to each other very, very soon. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.